Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to finish up this week with a creator request, which is where a band gets in contact with me and asks for me to check out some of their stuff. Today we have a band called Frozen Shield. They sent a request, said, "Hey, we saw you react to metal videos and thought you may be interested in giving a listen, and maybe reacting to the single we just released, as we consider it the best of the record. It's a symphonic Viking metal piece about an epic journey with some Winter Sun and Sephiroth vibes on it, including constant orchestral arrangement, guitar solos, clean and harsh vocals, folk instrumentation, headbangable riffs, and overall epicness. We hope you like it. Cheers." Who am I to argue with descriptions like headbangable riffs and overall epicness? I'm here for that. Right? I like the more specific ones. We have orchestras, we have folk elements, but then, you kind of also it's epic and headbangable. Like, yep, that's good. That's good enough for me. That's really all you had to say. All right, let's dive into this. We got Frozen Shield's The Greatest Journey. Ooh, get into it right off the bat. Beautiful vocal harmonies. Yeah, very playful. Yeah, a little bit of a brass stinger right there. Yeah, beautiful violin melody there. And we shifted to a triplet vibe there before hitting halftime here. Harmonizing the violin to the vocals, doing some textural layering there. Very uplifting. And we got this punk beat right here, driving the energy forward. Yes. I love how the melodic weight is being equally portioned out between the rock instruments and the orchestral elements. Oh, that lift was everything. So I wonder who has the classical background in here. Or I shouldn't even say classical. Who has the musical theater backgrounds? Yeah. Really enjoyed that solo. Oh man, that drum fill going into this section. All right, a little bit of a jig idea. Oh, now see, there is a loop, but I can't say I heard it. That bass work is so good. Oh, nice. We got a little variation on this chorus. Yeah. Oh, that little harp line. Pulling back to this triplet idea, possibly a 6/8, since it does seem to move into a bit of a sea shanty vibe. Yeah, I love those little glissandos. Oh, there's the loop. Bringing in a march idea. Extremely harsh transition. Was that blast beats I saw on the drums? On the snare? Dude, that flute fluttering around, the wild chord progression and the strings. Yeah. Gorgeous. Using the guitar solo to transition into this final section. That's good. So I have a lot of questions because this was phenomenally composed, phenomenally performed, phenomenally produced. and only has, I mean, 50,000 views is not, that's not a small amount, but it's also not a large amount. And they don't have their subscriber count on here. I am curious. Oh, their Spotify page. Let me see. 3,000 monthly listeners. That is so disheartening. These guys are so good. There is so many great ideas, and there's so much good talent behind this band. I don't understand why they have such a small amount of listens. Just, I don't know. Before I even get into this, if you enjoyed this, if you enjoy, Viking metal, folk metal, anything along those lines, and you're not listening to this right now, I don't know what to say. Um, all right, let's get into this analysis, right? That's why people come here. All right, so the first thing I want to start with, I mentioned it, I want to dive into it deeper. It's the passing back and forth of the spotlight between the orchestral elements, which I think is just the strings. I heard a brass stinger at one point, but I might have just been getting timbres confused because I never heard the brass really much throughout the rest of it. A lot of what I picked up on was the strings. But we had, we have the orchestral section, and then we have the metal section, which is the guitars and bass and vocals. And in a lot of bands, they will tend to pick one of them to represent the band melodically, and the other one will be used texturally. We see this in a lot of stereotypical symphonic metal, where the strings will just be there to play chords to provide this elegant or orchestral vibe next to the metal. Or we see the opposite of it, where the orchestra carries the entire song, and there's kind of this element of an edgy guitar tone underneath it that kind of is just there to give it that edginess and doesn't really contribute to much outside of the atmosphere. What I love about this is the passing back and forth. There are moments when the strings will be playing chords and we'll hear some guitar riffs over it, but those are pushed right up against moments where the guitars might be doing some chordal work and the strings are introducing some classical composition. So we get to hear a little bit of both with extremely moving chord uh, chord progressions in the classical side, and then more riff oriented metal writing from the guitars and bouncing back and forth between these two ideas. And it works so effortlessly. And I think that's the coolest part about it, is that they're passing this baton back and forth, not just allowing each instrument to have more of the spotlight, but also incorporating more elements from the or more tools that are indicative of the genre or the instrumentation, and allowing that to shine as well. It's not just using metal composition with these different timbres. We're actually bringing in classical composition techniques as well, and they're not they're not subject just to their instrumentation. The strings don't just play classical style music, they also occasionally play riff based stuff so that they can blend in better with what the guitars are doing. And the guitars also moves through some really interesting ideas as well that are not typically found in metal. So there is this love and understanding of not just these two groups of instruments, but the styles of music that they've traditionally in the past played, and understanding how to merge them with other styles of music and really utilize everything to its maximum potential in this song. And it is just gorgeous. And even knowing when to use certain timbres and when not to. There are occasions where we get just the electric guitars. There's occasions where we have just strings. There's occasions where we have the flute. It comes in out of nowhere. Like that could have been played throughout the rest of the track. The lute was there in a couple of places. but they know when they should appear and when to remove them to create contrast and balance and, just allowing each of these sections in the song to feel unique overall. Um, and in a lot of ways, because of all of this coming together this way, I get a rock opera vibe from this. And I don't know if it's just the musical component. I don't know if it's the vocals. I don't know if it's the group vocals. I don't know if it's the lyrical content. But I get the idea of a very well composed stage play, a musical about Vikings and going on adventures and it really has this theatric element to it. And that's why I asked somewhere in the middle of the track, I was like, which one of these guys has the musical theater background? Because I don't think that this is a coincidence. Now, it very well could be. They could just be combining classical music and metal music, and they landed on something that feels very theatric and larger than life and kind of musical like. But it also feels very intentional going into that angle. And I think I might put money on that. I'd wager that somebody in here has done musicals in the past and or has a love for musicals, because there just seems to be a lot of inspiration for that specific sound and style of music writing, and it shines. It really does. I love the way that this song feels. It doesn't really feel like a Viking metal song. It doesn't really feel like folk metal to me. It has those elements because of the flute and the lute and the violin, some of these acoustic instruments that kind of lend themselves to that style of metal. But oh, and lyrically, of course, it fits in with that type of metal, but it doesn't feel like it. Like all the pieces are there, but there's just enough difference here in some nuance, which I'm going to assume is maybe some underlying chordal ideas that really push it out of the realm of metal into uh, performative classical, I think is the way I want to describe that. The type of music you would hear in a musical. There's specific music that when you listen to it, you're like, oh, that reminds me of Broadway, or that reminds me of, Disney's musicals when I was a kid, or anything like that. There's a specific sound to musical writing, and I don't quite know what that ingredient to the recipe is, but it is present here, and I love it because it changes my relationship to the music. I'm not a huge fan of folk metal. I think it's inventive. I love the voices that they use. Um, I love the combining of classic acoustic instruments with modern metal electric ones. I think it all sounds very cool, and when done well, there's a lot of really interesting ideas that are presented in this style of music. But for whatever reason, it just never catches me as something that I would want to listen to casually. It's something I tend to appreciate on an artistic level. And this makes me want to dive into it though. But it's like I said, it's not really the Viking or the folk part. It's sort of this this feeling that it feels like a lost musical. There's no video recorded of this musical, but we have the music from the show kind of vibe. I love that. Um, so yeah, that's something I have questions about. Frozen Shield, if you show up in the comments here, I would not mind an answer to that. Does anybody in the band have a musical theater or background or an appreciation for musicals in general? The next thing I want to talk about then would be some of the individual instrumentation ideas. Um, the drumming, phenomenal. just amazing. I love the precision, the accuracy, and the experimentation in it. There's a lot of really interesting concepts in here that, again, kind of move outside of the Viking metal realm. I'm not sure if double bass kicks and blast beats are typical of the genre, but I do enjoy, especially when they're paired with the growls, kind of bringing in a little bit of that, what I believe is kind of like a black metal edge maybe into some of the more lighthearted elements, and the way that that contrasts with the bright, upbeat, energetic, adventurous music. Like you're bringing the energy and intensity of that genre into the energy that's being brought about from the rest of the instruments in sort of a brighter manner than that heaviness, and it really works well at creating that specific vibe of, forward momentum into whatever we meet. Whatever lies ahead of us, we're diving straight into it. We're that sure of ourselves. We're that strong of a group of people that we can do that and not have any worries about what might befall us, because we're certain that we'll get through it, kind of thing. But then, then we move into like the punk beat that came out of nowhere. Again, just really driving home a lot of energy that I don't think I've really heard paired with this type of music before. But then the drummer also has this gentler ornamental side, specifically the not quieter, but more subtle, restrained. The restrained section, a couple of those that came in, really focusing on cymbal work rather than toms and snares and bass, and providing that shimmer in those sections. But also listen to the way that he utilizes the cymbals in the regular playing. There's some really neat ideas and embellishments that he's utilizing the cymbals for in those concepts. The bassist is just a beast. I do wish the bass volume was a little bit higher. I don't know what's going on with it. I don't know if it's a volume thing or if it's an EQ thing. I heard a few lines, but to me it was drowned out a bit more often than not, which fits with the Viking metal sound. I can't really think that I've heard too much folk or Viking metal with prominent bass tone resonance, but it is still a bit of a I don't want to say disappointment. I do wish I could hear the bass a little bit more, because the few runs that I did hear they were tight, they were precise, and they were clean. Just like some great bass playing. Um, and then, of course, I saw some of the bass lines. Maybe I didn't necessarily get to hear them, but I saw them being performed here, and they looked really cool. I wish I could have heard what was being produced there. So again, overall, I think the mix works, especially compared with the contemporaries in the genre. But as a bass player, I do wish that it was just a hair bit louder. So at least when I'm looking for it, I can find it more easily. The guitarist, man. Okay, so melody writing. I guess we'll start with the guitar work and then move into the melody writing, and we'll bring in the clean vocals and the violin from that angle. Both of the guitarists, anyways, their solo sections were very well done. I love the way that they incorporated elements of the song, the core melodies, into their vocal playing. So it didn't feel like we entered a solo. I mean, they incorporated elements of the main melody into their solo playing. So it didn't feel like we entered a solo section. It just felt like we entered into a guitar highlight that extended the core ideas of the storytelling and the music to the next section of the song. It was just a natural extension of what we had already heard. It just happened to highlight one of these instruments. And I think that's one of the best ways to go about playing a solo in this context. It's not about putting the spotlight on the guitarist, it's about allowing the guitarist to continue telling the story in their own way. And the subtle transition into and out of these solo sections by taking the melody we just previously heard and working off of the chord progression, or maybe working off of one or two of the rhythmic ideas in it, or one of the melodic ideas, and developing that into what the solo would become, and gradually transitioning through the solo, not really it feeling too rigid. It really is a beautiful flow of ideas that leads us into the next moment. It's just it's almost like guitar solos as transition concepts, and it works so well here, which just kind of leads to all of the melody writing in here, which I just find phenomenal. There's certainly catchier elements, but there's some really nice emotional concepts as well in the melody, especially the one-off ideas like the key rises, and those lifts that we had going into the final chorus, I think it was, when the entire band was basically bringing up to the next chord, and then the next chord, and the next chord. We had this really nice delayed resolution of the chord progression there. And like, just whether it is a melody in itself or an underlying chordal property, or chord progression, or entirely new idea being presented, they were all fascinating to me. It's just, it's so good. And the cool thing is, I think if we got rid of the electric guitars, like this is a complete aside, but if we got rid of the electric guitars and arranged this for an orchestra, I don't know many people would not realize it wasn't originally written for one. There's just a lot of really clean and strong classical techniques, compositional techniques being utilized all throughout this track, and it's so good. Yeah, the violin, I mean, just kind of goes along with the melody writing, where it seems like no matter what, there's just smooth transitions between structure or between sections of this song, and the melody tends to carry them between these sections, whether it is a guitar or the violinist. And the cool thing is that sometimes we'll have more subtle, gentler transitions where we're working with longer notes, whole notes, and half notes. And other times we'll have a little bit of shred. Maybe we'll have tapping in the guitars or just a faster eighth note run in the violin. So we get to see both sides and both types of voices from all these instruments. And going back to the atmosphere, right? I talked about how there's this adventurous, bolsterous, kind of, let's go into the forest and see what's out there kind of vibe. Lots of energy, lots of positive energy, especially. I like how I think it's the chorus, everybody chimes in and we get this group vocal concept going on, which I think just ties into these themes really strongly. Speaking of the lyrics, I'm looking at these real quick. It's interesting that occasionally we have a description of who is singing, like nature's silent voice pops up a couple of times. There's also moments where there's double slashes, and I'm not sure what that represents. There's actually a lot of lyrics in here. Um, but yeah, it's, I mean, it's called, the chorus is: the greatest journey is yet to come. Through the paths, up the hills, deep in stone, beyond maps, moving forth to a new dawn, heading to the unknown. The greatest journey is yet to come. So brace yourselves for the threats that lie ahead. And it's just, it is the Viking way of saying grab life by the horns. A lot of what's going on in here is saying, very much in character of being Vikings, the joys of waking up, knowing that you're alive, and continuing to do stuff that confirms your aliveness, while also, understanding that eventually all of our aliveness will end. There's one line, oh, the right before the end says, "The end haunts us all, and time will face the final shift. Still, course is for us to take." To the mountains, to the heights, right? So, it's this understanding that death comes for us all. We need to make the most of our life, And, that is the greatest journey. It's what's ahead of us. We don't know what's going to be there, but we need to face it head on. We need to do it with those around us. And it kind of takes that idea and tells it through the lens, the mindset of a Viking. Using words like tales of the outer world, myths and histories guide our steps in a quest for feats. Um, it's like, yeah, it just means, there's things out there that we need to discover, and we should go discover it. But it's like wrapped into a very Norse, not Norse, but like uh, folk style, I suppose, classic style of understanding of the world. And I think it's awesome. I think it's a fantastic message to tell. It's an inventive way to tell it, and it fits well into the overall themes and vibes of the song that's around it. And that song itself is gorgeous and beautiful and filled with tons of interesting ideas. So, yeah, those are those all my thoughts? I think those are all my thoughts on Frozen Shield's The Greatest Journey. Like I said earlier, if you dug this, go check them out. We need to bump these numbers up. I don't understand. Production, musicianship, composition are all off the charts, and they seem like they're still rather unknown of a group, and that's not fair. Um, so yeah, as usual, links to all their socials and where you can find their music, all that's down in the description rather than my usual stuff. Make sure you check them out, subscribe to their music, go check them out on Spotify, go listen to their stuff if it's up your alley. I will be back on Sunday with a Patreon live stream. It'll be our final one for April. There's no album reaction tomorrow, and then we'll be back on Monday for next week's theme. All right. You guys have a fantastic weekend. Keep being awesome. Remember to be critical, not cynical of the music you listen to. Have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or weekend. That is not how that goes. Fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.